Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day. It's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. Survival wasn't listed in the property details, yet the instant the lock clicked, the profession I'd cultivated, selling dreams encased in plaster and wood, dissolved into a primal scramble for existence. My name is Alara. For 12 years, I'd navigated the labyrinth of property sales, believing I'd encountered every quirk the market could offer. Persnickety clients, foundations whispering of collapse, even spectral tenants rumored in dusty attics. Nothing, however, foreshadowed the abyss that yawned open that sun-drenched Saturday in the sleepy enclave of Willow Creek. The residence on Sycamore Lane, a grand dame of Victorian architecture with its cascade of gables and filigree trim, lingered unsold for months. A certain chill clung to its reputation. The previous inhabitants had drawn their final breaths within its walls. Natural circumstances, the paperwork insisted, though whispers persisted, warding off the superstitious. An open house felt like the only recourse. Unlatching the imposing front door that morning, I braced for a day measured in slow ticks of the clock and echoing footsteps. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the fleeting passage of curious locals, a young family adrift in daydreams, an elderly man dissecting the cornices with academic fervor. As shadows lengthened, solitude settled in. I was adrift on my phone, contemplating an early retreat when his silhouette filled the doorway. Tall, impeccably tailored, offering a smile that disarmed like a practiced art. "Have I missed the viewing?" His voice smooth as river stone. "Not entirely," I countered, snapping back into my professional guise. "Closing soon, but please allow me." We moved through the echoing rooms, his inquiries sharp, precise. Foundation integrity, electrical updates, the lineage of the property. The cellar drew his particular focus, its sheer volume, the robust lock affixed to the door. "Discretion is paramount," he murmured, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. Yet, standing threshold to the master suite upstairs, a discordant note struck. He lingered, a physical barrier, his gaze sweeping the chamber with an unnerving possessiveness. "Ideal," he breathed, "utterly ideal." A tremor traced my spine. I manufactured a smile. "Shall we return below? I have the offer documents ready should you be inclined." He pivoted, and the genial mask dissolved. What remained was starkly predatory, a chilling calculation freezing the air between us. "Oh, my interest is quite definite," he purred, the sound scraping against my nerves, "but the house itself is merely staging." My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat demanding escape. "If you're not a prospective buyer, sir, I must insist you depart. I have another engagement." A hollow laugh echoed. "An illusion. I've observed this place, observed you. You're quite alone." Before thought could translate to action, his grip clamped onto my arm, propelling me backward into the room's staged elegance. The definitive click of the lock reverberated, sealing my panic. "What is this?" My voice, a ragged whisper, his smile stretched, a grotesque distortion of warmth. "A diversion," he stated. "This sprawling, vacant stage. It begs for a performance, wouldn't you agree?" My eyes darted, desperate for leverage, a makeshift weapon, but the room offered only impersonal decor, curated emptiness. "My office anticipates my call," I bluffed, injecting false steel into my tone. He shook his head with theatrical pity. "Ah, but you hinted at an early departure, didn't you? Should the day prove slow, no alarms will sound until Monday." The truth struck like ice water. He was correct. My casual remark had become my cage. "So," he continued, producing a blade from his jacket, its polished surface catching the light ominously, "let the overture commence." Thus began a harrowing ballet of pursuit and evasion. I slipped past his grasp, a fleeting victory, only to discover the house had become a meticulously sealed vault. The grand front entrance secured from within, the charming period windows I'd lauded hours before, now impassable barriers. I fled through a labyrinth of rooms, his measured tread a constant echo, his voice a silken thread of mockery weaving through the silence. "Where could she be?" he crooned, transforming the elegant space into a playground for his twisted amusement. Sanctuary beckoned in the narrow darkness of a linen closet. Breath held captive in my lungs, I listened as his footsteps receded down the hallway. A fragile moment of relief bloomed, only to be instantly shattered as the door ripped open. He'd anticipated me, waited with chilling patience. A raw scream tore from my throat as adrenaline surged, propelling me past him. The staircase became my only vector, the upper floor my desperate hope. A room, a window, a chance. The guest suite. I slammed the door, ramming the spindly chair beneath the knob, a flimsy bastion. His ascent was unhurried, each step a deliberate beat against the rising tide of my fear. He knew my options dwindled. Trembling fingers fumbled with the window latch. It held fast, fused by generations of paint. My gaze swept the room, frantic, snagging on a glint of wrought iron, an antique poker resting by the cold hearth. I seized its weight just as the door groaned, wood splintering under his assault. "Resistance only prolongs the inevitable." His voice seeped through the fracture. "Surrender. No cavalry is en route." But as the fractured door gave way and his form filled the opening, readiness had found me. I swung the heavy poker, a desperate arc fueled by terror, connecting with a sickening thud against his skull. He crumpled, the knife skittering across the floorboards. No hesitation, no second glance. I bolted past his prone figure, down the stairs, my heart a frantic prisoner against my ribs. Reaching the front door, I wrestled with the handle, still immovable. Behind me, upstairs, a groan signaled his return to consciousness. Panic clawed. A weighty brass candlestick on a nearby table became my tool. I brought it down against the door's small glass inset. Shards rained inward. Heedless of the biting edges slicing my arm, I reached through the opening, fumbling until my fingers found the lock mechanism. A click of release coincided with the sound of his heavy, uneven descent from the landing. I burst onto the wide porch, the cool evening air a shock, screams tearing from my lungs into the quiet street. A man, walking his dog, startled, saw my state, his phone instantly dialing emergency services. Within moments, the tranquil lane pulsed with flashing lights. They apprehended him attempting a rear exit, a fugitive wanted across multiple states for assaults bearing a chilling similarity. His vehicle yielded grim testament that I was merely the latest quarry, not the first, and, tragically, not intended to be the last. The ensuing weeks dissolved into a disorienting montage. Sterile hospital corridors, stark police interrogation rooms, the quiet sanctuary of therapy. Sleep offered no refuge, haunted by his visage, every creak of the floorboards a phantom footstep. 2 years have passed. The keys and contracts of real estate lie abandoned. The thought of solitary vigils and vacant properties remains unbearable. Yet, from the wreckage, a different structure is rising. I lend my voice now to advocate for the safety of those who walk the same path I did, urging awareness, demanding better safeguards for agents navigating vulnerability alone. Occasionally, my route takes me past the Sycamore Lane house. New life inhabits it now, a family's laughter echoing where terror once reigned. They remain unaware, blissfully so, of the darkness that unfolded within those walls. The razor's edge I walked haunts the periphery of thought. The poker, the neighbor's timely stroll, threads of chance that held my life together. I resist the pull of what if. Instead, I hold on to the harsh truths gleaned. Intuition is a vital compass, an exit strategy non-negotiable, and the reservoir of inner fortitude runs deeper than imagined, often untapped until the direst need. To my former colleagues navigating showings and listings, vigilance is your shield. That polished veneer, that engaging inquiry, might mask something else entirely. Announce your location. Consider partnership for open houses. Redundancy feels trivial until it's the one thing standing between you and a nightmare. And for everyone, courage isn't the absence of fear, but the resolve to act despite its icy grip. We all possess a tensile strength, revealed only when tested by the crucible. I endured that day on Sycamore Lane. I faced the predator in his chosen lair and emerged, breathing, scarred, but alive. It is not a narrative I ever wished to claim, yet it is irrevocably mine. If its telling serves as a warning flare, if it prevents even one other soul from stumbling into a similar abyss staged within an empty house on a sunlit afternoon, then perhaps some measure of meaning can be salvaged from the terror. My tower's eye swept the black water, a solitary pulse against the storm's onslaught. This pillar of granite and glass, my hermitage, had always offered a stark comfort. Yet, on that night, lashed by a tempest of singular malice, observing the doomed dance of a ship far below, I could not fathom the darkness my gesture of salvation would usher in. Elias, they call me. For nigh on 2 decades, the beacon of St. Jude had been my world. A life pared down to essentials. The metronomic glide of the lantern, the percussive roar of surf on stone, the gulls' desolate cries, companions enough, until the storm broke. November clawed at the coast, a nor'easter spit in fury for days. The ocean was a cauldron of pewter and foam, waves like liquid mountains detonating against the tower, making the very stone shudder. I'd weathered gales aplenty, but this one bore teeth. During my rounds, amidst checks on the lamp and lenses, scanning the tormented horizon, I spied it, a vessel pitching like a child's forgotten toy, its navigation lights faltering specters in the gloom. A cold certainty settled in my gut. Against this sea, they were already ghosts. Without a second thought, I unleashed the foghorn's bellow, amplifying the lamp's glare, a desperate prayer to steer them from the jagged teeth surrounding my island perch. But the ocean, relentless, shoved the ship shoreward. Then, magnified through the brass binoculars, a shape detached itself, plunging into the churning chaos. Jumped or thrown? Impossible to say. Instinct clawed past reason. I bolted down the spiraling stairs, bursting into the wind's howl and the rain's horizontal sting. The cold was a physical blow as I navigated towards the small, precarious dock on the island's lee side. The current delivered the figure towards me, a struggling form against the gray tumult. Closer now, I saw it was a man, his movements feeble. I flung the lifebuoy, its rope snaking over the waves. With straining muscles and salt-scourged hands, I hauled him onto the dripping timbers. He was a ruin, spectral pale, racked with shivers, clothes shredded on a skeletal frame. Yet breath rattled in his chest. "Saved me," he choked, teeth hammering. Thought, the end. I pulled him upright. Inside, warmth awaits. As we struggled back towards the lighthouse's solid refuge, a backward glance confirmed the sea's victory. The ship had vanished, consumed. Guilt pricked. Could I have done more? I forced the thought away. One soul salvaged was the immediate task. Inside, by the potbelly stove's radiating comfort, I swaddled him in blankets, pressed a steaming mug of tea into his quaking hands. As a fragile warmth crept back into his features, I truly observed him. Younger than my first impression, perhaps early 30s. His face, honed sharp by hardship, held deep-set eyes that flickered nervously, mapping the confines of my small living space. A dissonance hummed beneath his surface, but I attributed it to the sea's brutal embrace. "Elias," I offered, seeking to anchor him. "Your name?" A pause, a flicker of something unreadable. "Malachi? It's Malachi." "You're safe now, Malachi. When the storm breaks, I'll raise the mainland, get you back." His reaction startled me, a flash of stark refusal in his eyes. "No," he snapped, the force jarring. Then, softer, regaining control. "No need. To rush. Wouldn't want to impose." I frowned. Strange, but the sea can warp a man's senses. No imposition, but we're island-bound until this blows over regardless. Rest is what you need. I led him to the sparse guest quarters reserved for infrequent inspectors. As I turned to withdraw, his hand shot out, gripping my arm with startling strength. "Thank you," he breathed again, his gaze intense, almost possessive. "I owe you." Sleep, that night, was a skittish creature. The storm persisted, a symphony of groaning wind and crashing water, but beneath it, a deeper disquiet brewed within me. Malachi. Something about him felt discordant. The vessel he claimed, no other souls sighted, no wreckage washed ashore. His aversion to rescue. Eventually, exhaustion must have claimed me, for I awoke with a jolt to furtive sounds echoing up the tower shaft. My watch read past 3. The storm had begun its retreat, the wind's shriek mellowing to a mournful sigh. Driven by unease, I rose to investigate. Nearing the small galley kitchen, I heard it. Low, urgent muttering. Malachi paced, a caged animal whispering to shadows. "Can't find me. Stay put. He doesn't know. I froze, ice tracing my spine. Hiding from whom? What didn't I know? A floorboard betrayed me, groaning underfoot. The whispers ceased instantly. Elias? Malachi's voice, suddenly light, falsely casual. You awake? Just fetching some water. I entered the kitchen, schooling my features into neutrality. Everything all right, Malachi? Thought I heard talking. He produced a brittle laugh. Just myself. Old habit. This tower, it has ears at night, doesn't it? I nodded mutely, the silence stretching taut between us. Excusing myself, I retreated, but sleep remained elusive. My mind raced, assembling the jagged pieces of my unexpected guest. Morning arrived gray and subdued. I resolved to uncover the truth, contact the mainland, inquire about maritime incidents, missing persons. Ascending towards the radio room, however, a sharp, repetitive clang shattered the quiet. My blood ran cold. I burst through the door. Malachi stood there, hammer in hand, bringing it down methodically onto the delicate workings of the wireless set. He spun, eyes blazing with a feral light. I can't let you call. He spat, voice raw. I won't go back. My hands rose placatingly. Malachi, calm down. Whatever this is, we can sort it out. But reason found no purchase. He lunged, the hammer arcing towards my head. I twisted away, stumbling backward on the steep stairs. The world became a dizzying vortex, culminating in an explosion of pain as my skull connected sharply with the unyielding iron. Consciousness returned fragmentedly, laced with throbbing agony. I was slumped in the cramped storage closet below the lantern room, wrists and ankles chafed raw by tightly knotted rope. Malachi paced outside the door. The frantic muttering resumed. Malachi, what is this? My voice emerged, a dry rasp. He paused, peering in, his eyes unnervingly bright. Forgive me, Elias. Truly, you seem decent, but I cannot go back. I will not. Over the ensuing hour, the truth bled out in ragged confessions. Malachi was fugitive scum, escaped from a prison transport vessel caught in the storm's maw. Amidst the pandemonium, he'd shed his manacles and hurled himself into the sea, choosing the ocean's gamble over the certainty of lifelong incarceration. They'll hunt me, he whispered, trembling not from cold, but from dread. But they won't look here, not yet. Need time, need to think. I argued, pleaded, tried to show him the futility, the inevitable worsening of his plight. But his ears were sealed by desperation's wax. Days melted into an indistinguishable gray smear. Malachi kept me bound, granting brief respites for basic needs. His paranoia grew, a constant buzzing fly. Every creak of the tower, every cry of a gull was the imagined approach of his pursuers. I watched, waited, marshaling my dwindling strength, searching for a lapse, an opening. But Malachi remained vigilant, his fear honing his senses to a razor's edge. Hope began to fray like old rope. Then, one night, mirroring the tempest that had delivered Malachi to my shore, the air began to thrum with an alien rhythm, unmistakable, a helicopter. Malachi reacted instantly, a choked cry escaping him as he scrambled towards the lantern room, intent on extinguishing the life-saving beam. In that chaotic moment, adrenaline surged. I strained against my bonds, felt the rope give. Agony shot through my cramped limbs as I forced myself upright, stumbling in his wake. I found him at the summit, grappling frantically with the lamp mechanism. Thought evaporated. Instinct took over. I launched myself at him. We collided, wrestling precariously on the narrow platform encircling the great lens, the wind tearing at us. A final, desperate shove broke his grip on the machinery. Malachi staggered backward, balance lost, his eyes widening in stark terror as he tipped over the low railing. His scream was ripped away by the gale, lost in the roar of the wind and waves as he plunged towards the unforgiven rocks far below. The helicopter, a routine supply drop delayed by the foul weather, touched down minutes later. The crew found me battered, incoherent, a wild man amidst the wreckage of my orderly life. Their shock deepened when I numbly led them to the broken shape sprawled on the shore's jagged edge. Later, recounting the ordeal to impassive officials, the bitter irony settled heavily. Malachi sought sanctuary in my lighthouse, only to transform it into a cage for us both. Automation came swiftly after. Progress, they termed it, technology rendering my vigil obsolete. But I knew. After Malachi, the tower felt tainted. No one, they presumed, would choose this isolation willingly again. Yet I remain, residing in a modest cottage on the nearby mainland, my gaze drawn nightly to the lighthouse beam as it sweeps its unwavering arc across the dark water. Because this place, despite the horror it hosted, is etched onto my soul. Sometimes I reflect the true monsters aren't dredged from the depths, but are those forged in the crucible of our own fear. The light endures, a steadfast gleam against the encroaching dark, and I endure, still watching, waiting for what the indifferent sea might next deposit upon my shore. A tremor ran up my arm the instant flesh met flora, a violation electric and absolute. That single, reckless touch shattered the day's tranquility. What began as a simple communion with the wild warped into a desperate flight from something utterly alien, something sprung from the shadowed core of the woods, a place the village elders spoke of only in hushed tones, a domain shunned even by the beasts. Ilara, they call me. The green world has always been my sanctuary, my obsession. An amateur taxonomist, a gatherer of simples, my weekends dissolved into explorations of the verdant expanse bordering our quiet hamlet. Cataloging, collecting, concocting, it transcended mere pastime. It was the very current linking my soul to the soil. That particular Saturday dawned unremarkable, promising only familiar solace. Dawn painted the sky as I shouldered my pack, guides, satchels, sustenance, and surrendered to the trail. Pine resin and loam scented the crisp air, avian melodies threaded the canopy, punctuated by the distant percussion of a foraging woodpecker. Hours melted away. The familiar paths receded, replaced by untrodden earth, drawing me deeper than prudence advised, until I breached a secluded glade. Sun shafts pierced the emerald ceiling, dappling the mossy floor, and there, commanding the clearing's heart, stood a specimen defying every botanical text. Leaves of profound, shifting violet gleamed with an unnatural luster. Its core throbbed, a slow, visceral pulse beneath the skin of the stem. Filaments, fine as spun glass, extended, undulating softly in an air utterly still. Prudence evaporated, consumed by sheer wonder. I drifted closer, fingers extended, drawn by an irresistible magnetism. A primal whisper screamed retreat, but the specimen's rhythm intensified, a silent, hypnotic summons. Contact. A shockwave detonated through my nervous system, fierce and invasive, a bioelectric overload. I recoiled, gasping, the connection irrevocably made. Silence hung heavy for a beat. Then, with horrifying deliberation, the plant stirred. Its filaments coiled, lengthened, questing towards me with unnerving sentience. The thrumming deepened, resonating not just in the air but within my bones. I staggered back, pulse hammering against my ribs. Impossible. Vegetation does not animate, does not pursue. Yet, before my disbelieving eyes, the impossible took form. It tore free from the earth, its root system contorting into spindly, nightmarish limbs. It scuttled, impossibly fast, tendrils whipping the air before it. Terror shattered my paralysis. I pivoted, plunging blindly into the dense undergrowth, heedless of path or noise. Behind, the frantic susurrus of leaves, the sharp crack of violated branches, the soundtrack of its relentless chase. My lungs screamed, my limbs turned to anchors of lead. Only when exhaustion threatened collapse did I risk a backward glance. The glade had vanished. A fragile bloom of hope withered instantly as a flicker of iridescent violet flashed between distant trunks. It persisted. It hunted. Dusk bled through the trees, stretching shadows into menacing claws. A new dread coiled in my gut. Disorientation. Panic had spun me directionless. Soon, darkness absolute would descend, trapping me in this primeval maze with the unnatural. Think, Alara, think. Shelter. A refuge, however temporary. As if conjured by desperation, a dark mouth appeared in a nearby embankment. A shallow cave. I scrambled towards it, furtive glances confirming my solitude for now. The unmistakable skittering erupted just behind me as I reached the threshold. I hurled myself inward, flattening against the cold, damp stone, breath seized in my throat. Outside, the scrabbling sound circled the aperture. Then, those questing filaments slipped into view, exploring the void. Time stretched taut. I prayed to forgotten gods for invisibility. After an eternity compressed into minutes, the tendrils withdrew. A ragged sigh escaped my lips, offering scant relief. Vigilance remained my only shield. It lingered nearby. Night deepened, amplifying the forest's mundane chorus, owl calls, unseen scurryings. Yet beneath it all, a pervasive, resonant hum persisted. The alien throb I'd first felt in the glade, now seemingly woven into the very fabric of the darkness. Oblivion claimed me eventually, fear succumbing to utter depletion. I surfaced to the weak gray light of dawn infiltrating the cave mouth. A fleeting, desperate hope arose. Perhaps it was merely nightmare. A cautious peer outside shattered that illusion. It waited, vigilant, its violet foliage beaded with dew. The instant it perceived me, it advanced. I recoiled into the shadows, mind frantic. Entrapment or exhaustion awaited. Escape seemed impossible. Then a fragment of forgotten lore surfaced. The primal aversion of flora to flame. A desperate gamble conceived in the crucible of fear. My fingers scrabbled through the pack, closing on Providence. Matches, a vial of spirit-based cleanser. Scant arsenal, yet potentially sufficient. A lungful of stale cave air, a silent vow. This was the precipice. I erupted from the cave. The creature reacted instantly, rearing, tendrils lashing out. This time I held fast. As it lunged, I compressed the vial, thumb striking phosphorus against the box. Alcohol met spark, birthing a sudden, hungry gout of fire. The reaction was instantaneous, violent. The entity flinched back, its searching filaments retracting as if scorched. A thin, piercing shriek tore through the air, vibrating against my teeth. Seizing the moment, I advanced, weapons spit in defiance. Each pulse of flame forced it backward, its scuttling now frantic, disordered. One final, desperate surge, I held the flame steady. The thing convulsed, its shriek escalating to an unbearable pitch. Then, astonishingly, horribly, it began to unmake itself. Iridescent leaves turned to brittle ash. The throbbing stem imploded. In seconds, only a mound of smoking ruin remained. I stood trembling, lungs heaving, limbs quivering with adrenaline's aftermath. Over. The word echoed hollowly. I had endured. Turning towards the promise of escape, my gaze caught on the periphery of the battleground, and my blood froze. Studding the disturbed earth, piercing the leaf litter, were countless tiny spears of iridescent purple. Seedlings. Understanding struck with the force of a physical impact. This victory was Pyrrhic, the battle merely a prelude. The creature I'd destroyed was but a vanguard, the first to ripen. An infestation lay nascent, poised to mature, to hunt, to spill beyond these ancient woods. Escape was no longer an option. Ignorance, a luxury forfeit. A chilling obligation settled upon me, to sound the alarm, to seek containment before this silent bloom became a consuming blight. The thought of these entities unleashed upon the unsuspecting world was unthinkable. Trudging towards the familiar tree line, my thoughts raced, forging strategies against the encroaching dread. Experts must be alerted. Scientists, authorities, anyone who might possess the knowledge to combat such an anomaly. Yet a grim certainty resonated within. I alone grasped the true nature, the visceral horror of the threat. I was the sole witness, the survivor. Whatever struggle awaited, I would stand at its heart. Knowledge, once a joy, now felt like a leaden mantle, yet it was also my only sword. Every observation, every memory of the creature's nature would be honed into a weapon against the burgeoning nightmare. Reaching the forest's fringe, I paused, casting a final glance into the shadowed depths where innocence died and this terrible purpose was born. A deep breath, a centering of will against the unknown trials to come. This was not an end, but a grim commencement. Yet I stood prepared, to confront, to shield, to wage war against the alien horrors gestating in the wild heart of the world. Someone must hold the line. And that someone, irrevocably, was Alara. Never did I imagine a lightless void between buildings could make my pulse hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. Walking solitary paths after sundown held little apprehension for me, particularly routes worn familiar by repetition. Yet a singular, unsettling episode reshaped that casual confidence. It unfurled some months past, though the phantom chill it imprinted on my nape lingers still. My nightly ritual involved collecting Alara, my intended, from her late shift at a modest establishment several blocks distant. I favored traversing the main thoroughfare on foot. It circumvented the sluggish crawl of vehicles, and offered a brisk air to scour the day's residue from my thoughts. A comfortable routine, until the evening something watchful materialized within the derelict plot wedged between two skeletal edifices. Let me trace it from its genesis. My departure was timed, around 10:30, for Alara's 11 o'clock release. The avenue stretched before me, a straight vein punctuated by the isolated luminescence of street lamps, each casting a weak halo on the pavement. Sporadic cars sliced through the quiet. To my right reared tall structures, shops shuttered and dark. To my left lay the sprawling vacancy, a ragged tapestry of overgrown weeds, splintered branches, and the detritus of indifference. A dilapidated chain-link fence traced a portion of its border, ruptured in places, gaping entirely open elsewhere. Typically, this zone commanded none of my attention. My gaze remained fixed ahead, my mind often adrift in the glow of my phone or lost in music. But on this particular evening, my peripheral vision snagged on a substantial canine form lurking near the fence line's shadows. I decelerated, an anomaly arrested my stride. The creature was large, its ears pricked and erect. Its coat absorbed the scant light, appearing obsidian black. No collar was discernible. It evoked the image of a German shepherd, yet leaner, somehow taller. A subtle tension coiled in my shoulders. Dogs themselves didn't frighten me, but an indefinable wrongness emanated from this one. It simply stood, oriented towards me, tracking my passage with unnerving stillness. I resisted the urge to stare, propelling myself forward, eyes glued to the concrete path. Instinct whispered, "Act normal. Provoke nothing." A faint rustling disturbed the tall grass, perhaps its paws shifting, perhaps wind teasing litter, but I forbade my head to turn. Reaching the block's end, I risked a fleeting backward glance. It remained, precisely positioned, its attention unwavering. My heart gave a percussive thud, though I attempted to dismiss the unease. I met Alara, walked her home, mentioning the dog casually. A stray, perhaps, she suggested. We left it there. A couple of nights hence, the same path beckoned. I found my gaze drifting towards the vacant expanse well before I drew level. Unsurprisingly, the dog was present, initially indistinct whether sitting or standing. Then it advanced, closer to the lot's edge, bordering the sidewalk. The sodium glare of a nearby lamp ignited its eyes with an odd phosphorescence. Were they amber or crimson? They flared momentarily, then blinked. A knot tightened in my stomach. This felt deliberate, as if its presence was specifically for me. No bark disturbed the quiet, no growl, yet the air itself seemed taut with unspoken intent. My palms grew damp. My phone became a rigid anchor in my hand. I compelled my legs onward, head bowed, striving for invisibility. My pulse throbbed in my ears. A bead of sweat traced a cold path down my spine. Vulnerability prickled my skin. The sense that, at any instant, it might surge towards me was palpable. Yet nothing transpired. It stayed, observing. I collected Alara, relaying the encounter. Concern flickered in her eyes, but we concurred. Absent aggression, perhaps my own nerves were amplifying the strangeness. We walked home together, hugging the far curb, granting the lot a wide berth. The subsequent week brought a dip in temperature. Alara's schedule shifted slightly, pushing my departure closer to 11. The avenue grew sparser, the sidewalks largely deserted. One Friday, under a crystalline sky where moonlight mingled with artificial light in a spectral wash, I commenced my familiar journey. My breath plumed visibly in the crisp air. Approaching the block, harboring the vacant lot, I registered the profound emptiness. Not another soul stirred. My footfalls echoed unnaturally loud against the pavement. Then a low vibration reached my ears. A growl, but unlike any canine threat I'd known, deeper, resonant. My chest constricted. Slowing my pace, I looked left. The dog stood sentinel in the lot's heart, yet nearer the street than previously. It seemed magnified in the isolation, its silhouette stark. The glow in its eyes burned with greater intensity. It lifted its head, ears twitching minutely. The growl repeated, and this time my scalp prickled. Adrenaline surged. A cold fire through my veins while my legs turned leaden. Indecision paralyzed me. Fleeing might incite pursuit. Continuing forward might close the distance. The creature took several deliberate steps towards the sidewalk, poised to breach the broken fence. My skin crawled. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. I opted to switch sides of the avenue, executing the maneuver with forced calm, my gaze locked with the animals across the intervening space. Its stare pinned me. My pulse hammered violently. 10 paces across, I risked another swift look back. The street was barren. The dog, gone. No flicker of movement, no receding padfall, utterly vanished. My heart seized. I spun, scanning the shadows, the empty expanse. Nothing, as if it had dissolved into the night air. Disorientation warred with stark fear. Had I hallucinated? But the growl had been visceral, undeniable. The hairs on my arms remained erect. My mouth was desert dry. Forcing myself onward, I focused solely on reaching Alara's workplace, my head swiveling constantly, anticipating its reappearance from some darkened alcove. My hands betrayed a slight tremor. Self-anger flared. Why this reaction? But the feeling was involuntary, profound. I was thoroughly rattled. Upon arrival, Alara immediately perceived my tension. "Are you all right?" she asked, her brow furrowed. I recounted the vanishing act, the preceding growl. Worry clouded her features. We mutually concluded that avoidance was the wisest course. From that night forward, my route changed. I veered right onto an earlier street, embarking on a detour that skirted shuttered storefronts and a hushed park. Longer, yes, but ostensibly safer. The new path boasted better lighting, often hosting a few late-night wanderers. No large black canine materialized there. For a time, a measure of ease returned, though I chafed at letting fear dictate my movements. The memory, however, those luminous eyes, that guttural rumble, remained indelible. Alara and I revisited the subject occasionally. She floated the idea of contacting animal control, but the lack of a specific address of any known den rendered it futile. It was merely a derelict plot, seemingly unclaimed. Inquiries with a neighbor yielded nothing. He hadn't seen such an animal. Another resident recalled stray dogs near dumpsters a block over, but nothing matching my description. I attempted revisiting my old route once, about a week after the vanishing, purely for reconnaissance. It was earlier, perhaps 9 in the evening. Approaching the block, my stomach clenched reflexively. My eyes scoured the lot, mostly obscured in shadow save for the weak illumination near the fractured fence. No movement, no dog, no cat, nothing animate. I stood for a moment, feeling my heart rate accelerate. The silence felt heavy, charged. A passing car's headlights swept the overgrown grass, revealing only emptiness. I exhaled, a shaky release, and retreated, relief mingling uneasily with residual apprehension. Later, cocooned in bed, the dog's intense stare replayed behind my eyelids. The conviction persisted. It was still out there. A few days later, a dream, walking past the lot, the eyes igniting in the gloom. I awoke slick with sweat, pulse racing. Recounting the nightmare to Alara earned me comfort, reassurances. Just a stray, the vanishing and growls perhaps amplified by fear. Yet she conceded its inherent creepiness, validating my continued detour. A month elapsed. The dog remained unseen on my altered path. A semblance of normalcy returned. I collected Alara around 11:15, traversed the longer circuit, studiously avoiding the vacant lot. One evening necessitated a stop at a convenience store on the main avenue, situated just before the dreaded block. Unease prickled as I approached. I aimed for swiftness. In, grab a drink, a snack, out. Stepping back onto the sidewalk, my gaze involuntarily shot down the street towards the lot. My skin tightened. A shadow, large dog-sized, shifted near the fence line. The streetlight flickered erratically, obscuring details. Nerves ignited. I walked away quickly, taking a circuitous route to Alara's building, my chest tight the entire way. Even now, months removed, a chill can find me when my thoughts stray to that forsaken patch of ground. The physics defy me. How could something so substantial simply cease to exist? The sounds remain vivid, its respiration low and rhythmic, that single growl, a subterranean tremor in the night air. The eyes reflecting that unearthly hue, somewhere between ochre and blood red. And its stillness. Most dogs fidget, bark. This one observed, assessed, as if attempting to comprehend me. I still venture out at night, but adhere strictly to the safer passage. Shadows are scrutinized now. Any unexpected movement triggers a spike in my pulse. Rationalization is a constant effort. A stray, wandered off surely, yet deep within, suspicion festers. Something elemental felt wrong. The vanishing act resists logical explanation. When I share this account with friends, they suggest overwrought nerves, the solitude embellishing details. Perhaps. But I know what I perceived. The growl resonated physically. The glowing eyes held mine. The cold dread that flooded my system was tangible. Fear sculpts the body. Its imprint is authentic. These days, well-lit spaces are my preference. Alara and I walk home in tandem whenever possible. Alone, my phone is clutched tight, my senses hyper-alert to every nuance of sound. I catch myself scanning architectural corners, peering beneath parked vehicles, just in case. Whether I will encounter that creature again remains unknown. A significant part of me prays against it. My residence hasn't changed. The vacant lot endures. The weeds climb higher, thrusting through the chain-link weave. More sections of the fence have succumbed, offering easier ingress and egress for anyone, or anything. Daytime passages reveal only neglect, litter, and rampant vegetation. No large paw prints, no fresh trails. This absence offers no solace. Each glance towards that spot resurrects the image. Eyes burning bright in the darkness. The night I heard that growl will likely remain etched in memory. The way my breath hitched, the slickness of sweat on my palm, It felt like a demarcation, a warning. Afterward came the realization some boundaries are best uncrossed. I learned to heed the instinct that screamed, "Stay away." And so I do. I circumvent that block, particularly after twilight descends. If asked why, I offer a simple truth. I had a bad experience there once. There's no dramatic culmination. No one was harmed, no narrow escape occurred. But the fear was genuine, transformative. It rewired my habits. I don't require another sighting to maintain respect for the peril I sensed. I don't question the longer walk, the heightened vigilance. That feeling of being watched, that resonant growl from the shadows, it was sufficient. Should our paths cross again, I hope it keeps to its side of the street, and I hope, against a persistent internal whisper, that it is merely a dog. For now, I'll keep to my chosen route and let the vacant lot hold its secrets in its overgrown, silent emptiness. The instant the cabin door swung inward, admitting him along with a blast of icy wind and rain, a certainty colder than the storm settled in my gut. We had welcomed ruin into our sanctuary. His smile was a carefully constructed warmth, but his eyes held the flat, frozen gray of the tempest tearing through the pines outside. A predator, invited across the threshold, and the lock had just clicked shut behind us all. This mountain escape, nestled deep in the Rockies, was meant to be an idyll. Months of planning between Leo, Chloe, Maya, and myself had culminated in this remote haven, promising rugged trails by day and crackling fires by night. The first 48 hours unfolded like a dream. Vistas that stole breath, glimpses of elusive wildlife, evenings thick with laughter over worn board games and whispered confessions. Day 3 shattered the illusion. We woke beneath a bruised sky, thunder growling its low warning in the distance. Leo, our self-appointed meteorologist, scanned the churning clouds with a furrowed brow. "Serious weather moving in," he murmured, the suggestion of an early departure hanging heavy in the air. But the allure of one final trek proved too strong. We'd brave the hots, we decided, retreat into the cabin's sturdy embrace if the heavens truly unleashed their fury. We should have heeded Leo's caution. Barely halfway along the ridge trail, the sky ruptured. Rain descended not in drops but in solid, blinding curtains, plastering our clothes to our skin in moments. The temperature plummeted. Teeth chatter in a frantic rhythm against the wind's shriek as we stumbled back toward shelter. Perhaps a mile from safety, a sound pierced the gale. Faint, desperate, unmistakably human. A cry for help. We froze, exchanging uncertain glances through the downpour. "Hello?" My voice strained against the wind. "Is anyone out there?" A figure detached itself from the dripping gloom of the forest, staggering towards us, head bowed against the deluge. Closer now, we saw a man, 30s perhaps, dark hair slicked to his skull. "Thank heavens," he gasped, relief flooding his voice. "Completely lost my bearings in this. Thought I was done for." Introductions were hasty, sodden things. We were Leo, Chloe, Maya, and I. He offered the name Silas, explaining a solo camping venture turned treacherous by the sudden squall. "Our cabin isn't far," Chloe offered, her voice conned above the storm's howl. "You're welcome to shelter with us until this passes." Silas's face seemed to illuminate from within. "Truly? That's incredibly generous. I don't know how to thank you." The final stretch back was filled with Silas's easy chatter, anecdotes of wilderness passion, his life as a nomadic photographer. By the time the cabin silhouette loomed through the rain, we were all shivering violently, consumed by the singular desire for warmth and dryness. Leo coaxed a fire to life in the hearth, while Chloe and Maya unearthed spare clothes for our unexpected guest. I put coffee on, the aroma a small comfort against the chill that had seeped into my very marrow. Gathered around the flickering flames, mugs warming our hands, the unease I'd tried to suppress returned, insidious and persistent. Something about Silas felt dissonant. The way his gaze swept the room, cataloging details with unsettling speed. A subtle tension in his posture, coiled like a spring wound tight. Just rattled from the storm, I told myself, dismissing the feeling. We were all on edge. As twilight deepened into a storm-lashed night, Silas held court, spinning tales of distant lands and thrilling encounters. He possessed a disarming charm, laced with humor, and his gratitude seemed utterly sincere. Yet, intermittently, I'd glimpse it, a fleeting coldness behind the easy smile, a flicker of sharp calculation in his eyes that sent a shiver tracing down my spine, unrelated to the damp chill. Exhaustion claimed us early. The cabin offered only one spare room, which naturally fell to Silas. The rest of us assumed our established spots, Leo and Chloe sharing a room, Maya claiming the sofa, and my sleeping bag laid out on the living room floorboards. Sleep, however, remained elusive. I lay listening to the storm's symphony of violence outside and, more disturbingly, to the unfamiliar cadence of Silas's movements overhead. Each creak of the aged wood above was a jolt to my already frayed nerves. Well, past midnight, a sound sliced through the storm's din. The soft, deliberate click of a door latch, followed by stealthy footfalls on the staircase. My breath hitched. I strained to hear, my own heartbeat thundering against my ribs. The steps paused at the landing, then, agonizingly slow, began moving towards the living room, towards Maya. A faint rustle, then Maya's drowsy murmur. "What's going on?" "Shh." Silas's voice, stripped of all warmth, now low and menacing. Not a sound. A paralyzing cold surged through me. Scrambling from my sleeping bag, my hands scrabbled blindly in the oppressive darkness for anything solid, anything defensible. My fingers closed around the reassuring weight of a heavy metal flashlight just as Maya emitted a choked, muffled cry. I lunged into the living room, thumbing the flashlight's switch. The sudden beam carved a horrifying tableau from the blackness. Silas looming over Maya, one hand clamped brutally over her mouth, the other brandishing a knife whose blade gleamed with cruel intent. "Leave her alone." The shout tore from my throat as I swung the flashlight like a club. Silas's head snapped towards the light, his eyes reflecting it with a feral, predatory sheen. For one suspended heartbeat, we were locked in that vignette of terror. The assailant poised, the victim silenced, the rescuer armed with pathetic light. Then chaos erupted. Silas lunged, the knife arcing towards me. Instinct drove my swing. The flashlight connected solidly with his forearm. The knife spun away, clattering onto the wooden floor. Maya's scream, finally freed, ripped through the cabin's confines. Upstairs, doors banged open. Leo and Chloe, roused by the nightmare unfolding below. Silas and I grappled, a clumsy, desperate dance amidst overturned furniture. His strength was surprising, fueled by a manic energy I couldn't comprehend. His hands found my throat, squeezing, the world dissolving into frantic, dancing spots. Air became a forgotten luxury. Then, abruptly, the pressure vanished. Leo had barreled into Silas from behind, a human missile sending them both crashing to the floor. Chloe rushed to Maya's side, Maya now sobbing uncontrollably. "Call someone," I gasped, my voice a raw rasp. Chloe fumbled for her phone, her face pale in the dim light. But Silas, pinned beneath Leo's considerable weight, laughed, a hollow, chilling sound utterly devoid of humor. "No bars," he stated, his voice unnerving in its calmness. "Storm took the towers down. Just us out here." The truth of his words settled over me like a shroud. Miles from anywhere, utterly cut off. "Why?" Leo grunted, struggling to maintain his hold. "Why are you doing this?" Silas's eyes glittered in the shadows. "Why? Because it's possible. Because nothing matches the exquisite thrill of the chase. And the four of you." He ran his tongue over his lips, a gesture so grotesque it churned my stomach. "You promise such exceptional sport." It was as if a mask hadn't just slipped, but shattered, revealing the monstrosity that had worn Silas's charming face. This wasn't a lost hiker. This was a hunter, and we, his cornered quarry. What followed stretched into the longest night imaginable. We managed to bind Silas securely with salvaged extension cords, yet sleep remained an impossibility. We huddled together in the living room, every groan of the old cabin, every intensified howl of the wind sending fresh waves of adrenaline through us. Silas talked. He kept talking, his monologue a sickening blend of threats and warped justifications. He spoke of others, of the intoxicating rush of extinguishing a life. We tried desperately to tune him out, but his voice was a corrosive thing, seeping into our minds, nourishing the terror that held us captive. As the first hints of dawn bruised the eastern sky, the storm began, at last, to relent. A hushed, frantic debate ensued. Hike out now, risking whatever dangers lay between us and civilization, possibly even accomplices Silas might have hinted at, or remain barricaded, praying for overdue rescue. Ultimately, Leo and I resolved to make the perilous journey down, leaving Chloe and Maya, armed with the recovered knife and a heavy fireplace poker, to stand guard over our bound tormentor. The descent was treacherous. Trails, ravaged by the storm, were now slick mudslides littered with debris. Every snapping twig, every rustle in the undergrowth had us spinning around, hearts hammering, half expecting to see Silas, impossibly free, closing in behind us. When we finally stumbled into the clearing housing the ranger station, we were coated in mud, utterly spent, teetering on the ragged edge of hysteria. The rangers listened, their initial skepticism slowly dissolving as they registered the raw terror etched onto our faces. Radio calls crackled. Backup was summoned, and soon we were heading back up the mountain, flanked by uniformed officers. We found the cabin door hanging open, splintered near the frame. A cold dread clenched my heart as we surged inside. The extension cords lay on the floor, severed cleanly. Chloe and Maya were huddled in a corner, visibly shaken, weeping but blessedly, physically unharmed. Silas was gone. The police initiated a sprawling search, but Elias Thorne, his true name, unearthed in the subsequent investigation, seemed to have been swallowed whole by the vast, indifferent wilderness. He was, we learned with sickening clarity, a serial predator wanted across 3 states, a phantom who used the wild places as his hunting grounds, preying on those, like us, foolish enough to mistake a monster's mimicry for human kindness. We were the lucky ones. A chilling thought, considering how narrowly we'd escaped. 5 years have passed since that night. Therapy has helped blunt the sharpest edges of the trauma, the suffocating guilt. Guilt for letting him in, guilt for failing to hold him, guilt for the unknown others who might yet cross his path because we couldn't keep the monster caged. I still seek solace in the mountains, still feel the pull of the wild, but true ease remains elusive. Every lone figure on a distant trail becomes a potential silhouette of Silas. Every unexpected sound in the woods raises the hairs on my neck. And when the storms roll in, when the wind moans around the eaves, I'm instantly transported back to that remote cabin, watching a wolf clad in borrowed humanity step across our threshold, forever altering the landscape of our lives. Apex Spire breathed at night, a sighing leviathan of steel and glass. Or so Elias told himself, the first time the floor above whispered with phantom steps. He chalked it up to structural groans, the settling sighs of 50 stories against the dark. But then came the sandwich, half-eaten, abandoned in the sterile chill of a break room refrigerator, belonging to no one on the roster, and a cold dread began to crystallize. They weren't alone. Someone was nesting within the tower's hollows, a phantom flitting through the corporate labyrinth. For 6 months, Elias had walked these hushed corridors, a night watchman cocooned in the spire's nocturnal quiet. It suited him, this ghost shift. The echo and emptiness was fertile ground for the graduate studies that consumed his days. Below, on the lower strata, a few tenacious souls might chase deadlines under pools of lamplight, but mostly the tower slept. His duties were elemental. Circuits every couple of hours, the unblinking eyes of the monitors, the gatekeeping against the outside world. Often, the most significant battle was against the tide of sleep. It commenced on an October Tuesday, deep in the night's velvet folds. Elias was tracing his familiar path across the 30th floor's shadowed expanse, the silence broken only by his own footfalls. Then, above, a scuff, delicate yet undeniable, filtering down from the ceiling. He froze, straining his ears against the building's ambient hum. Silence stretched, and then another step, softer this time, followed by a faint dragon sound. His pulse quickened, a nervous drum against his ribs. Floor 31 was vacant, confirmed sterile on his previous round barely an hour past. He keyed his radio, the static a brief hiss before his voice cut through. "Marco, anything moving on 31? A beat of silence, then Marco's voice, tinny and distant from the ground floor command center. "Negative, Elias. Dead as a doornail up there. What's up?" Elias felt a flush of foolishness. Thought I heard. Probably just the building talking to itself. Marco chuckled, the sound crackling. "Yeah, she's a creaky old girl at night. Don't let the ghost stories get to you, kid." He completed his patrol, the unease clinging like damp air. But the whispers didn't cease. Over the ensuing weeks, tiny anomalies accrued like dust motes catching the light. A lone ceramic mug in a break room sink, absent hours before. Lights inexplicably burning in chambers he distinctly recalled darkening. Once, traversing the 28th, he discovered a workstation humming, screen alive with the flickering scroll of a social feed, though the floor's last denizen had departed long ago. He relayed these oddities to Marco, who remained unconvinced. Workaholics pulling all-nighters, forgetting to sign out or rinse their cups, he'd offered with an indifferent shrug. Yet the feeling persisted, a dissonant chord humming beneath the surface calm. Elias sharpened his senses during his rounds, his gaze sweeping for the misplaced, the incongruous. He started noticing subtler signs, minute flecks of food clinging to the plastic lining of supposedly empty waste bins, a specific divot in a lounge sofa cushion, as if recently cradling a sleeping form. The sandwich incident, roughly a month after the initial phantom footfalls, solidified his fear. Performing his routine check of the refreshment stations, he opened the refrigerator on the 35th floor. There it sat, stark against the wire shelf, half a turkey sandwich on wheat. Innocuous, except the entire floor was sealed, undergoing renovations, utterly devoid of personnel for weeks. His radio call was immediate. "Marco, you wouldn't happen to know about a sandwich pilgrimage to the 35th floor fridge, would you?" Sandwich? Marco's confusion was palpable. That floor's locked down tighter than a drum. Nobody's supposed to be up there. My thoughts exactly. He could almost visualize Marco's frown wrinkling the airwaves. "All right, sit tight. I'm coming up. Let's have a look." Together, they conducted a meticulous search, floorboards echoing their steps, but discovered nothing beyond the enigmatic sandwich. It remained an anomaly, yet it was sufficient. Marco's skepticism finally yielded. "Okay," Marco conceded as the elevator descended smoothly towards the lobby's marble expanse. "From here on out, we log everything. Every little off-key detail, write it down. We'll get to the bottom of this." Their chronicle of curiosities swelled over the next week. More pilfered snacks from break rooms, the unsettling discovery of a damp shower stall in an executive washroom long dormant, and persistently, those barely audible footsteps ghosting through the upper levels in the dead of night. They presented their growing dossier to the building manager, whose reception was lukewarm. "Sounds like the cleaning crews, maybe some late-working tenants," he countered, dismissive. "Unless you physically see an unauthorized individual, my hands are tied." But Elias knew. This was no mere oversight, no simple explanation. Someone, something, was inhabiting the spire, a scavenger subsisting on the detritus of office existence, moving unseen. The culmination arrived on a Friday night in the heart of December. Elias manned the security desk alone. Marco had called in sick. A pre-holiday exodus had drained the tower, leaving it unusually still. He was midway through his 10 o'clock patrol when the lights died. One moment, fluorescent brilliance. The next, absolute blackness, swiftly followed by the emergency system's blood-red spectral glow painting the corridors. He reached for his radio. Dead air. The backup generator, designed for precisely this scenario, should have instantly bridged the gap, keeping communications live. A cold spike of adrenaline shot through him. Something was profoundly wrong. Heart hammering, he navigated by the crimson light towards the nearest stairwell, needing to assess the systems back at the command post. As his hand pushed the heavy fire door inward, the sound hit him. Frantic footsteps pounding down the concrete stairs from above. He froze, knuckles white on the metal bar. The steps grew louder, echoing, closing the distance within the stairwell's tight acoustics. Instinct screamed. He let the door swing shut, recoiling into the hallway, eyes darting for refuge. A janitorial closet stood a few meters away. He lunged, slipping inside, pulling the door almost closed just as the stairwell door crashed open against the wall. Through the narrow ventilation slats, bathed in the hellish red light, a figure darted past. Male, gaunt to the point of emaciation, crowned with a wild tangle of matted hair. His attire was a bizarre collage of scavenged office wear, a suit jacket swallowing his thin frame, ill-fitting trousers, shoes gaping at the soles. He moved with a peculiar twitching urgency, head snapping side to side, scanning for pursuit. He clutched a crude weapon, a broom handle, its end splintered into a sharp point. Elias held his breath as the figure passed his hiding place, the silence in the closet absolute, terrified that the frantic beat of his own heart might betray him. The man paused momentarily, a silhouette against the red glow, and Elias was certain he'd been sensed. But then, the figure lurched onward, vanishing around the corridor's bend. Agonizing minutes ticked by before Elias dared to emerge. He eased the closet door open, peering into the empty hall, the low hum of the emergency lights the only sound. His thoughts raced. Escape, call for help, the immediate priorities. Yet, he couldn't abandon the spire to this desperate intruder. Cornered, what might this man do? Carefully, cautiously, he retraced his steps towards the security office, every shadow a potential threat. The backup systems were indeed offline, deliberately sabotaged. A sudden intuition led him to the spare radio cabinet. Empty. The squatter had orchestrated this, severing their lifeline, plunging the tower into darkness. But to what end? He was weighing his perilous options when a sharp crash reverberated from floors above, followed by the distinct tinkle of shattering glass. Whatever the man's objective, Elias had to intervene. Armed only with his heavy-duty flashlight and a burgeoning sense of dread, he began the ascent. The noise seemed to originate around the 40th floor. Climbing through the eerie red twilight, questions swirled. How long had this man dwelled here, unseen? How had he survived, a ghost in the corporate machine? Reaching the 40th floor, he eased the stairwell door open. The sounds of frantic rummaging emanated from down the hall. An office. He moved towards the noise, nerves taut. The door to the CEO's suite hung slightly ajar, spilling a sliver of light. Muffled muttering mingled with the scrape of drawers being yanked open. Taking a fortifying breath, Elias pushed the door wide and stepped across the threshold. There he was, hunched over the expansive desk, scattering papers like autumn leaves. He snapped his head up at Elias's entrance, eyes wide, feral, caught in the flashlight's stark beam. "It's over," Elias stated, striving for a steady tone. "Police are on their way. You need to come down now." The man simply stared for a heartbeat. Then, with startling agility, he vaulted the desk, launching himself at Elias. Reacting purely on instinct, Elias swung the heavy flashlight, connecting with the side of the man's head. He staggered, a guttural cry escaping him, giving Elias the crucial second needed to sidestep. The man slammed into the doorframe, howling with pain and fury. Before he could regain his balance, Elias tackled him, leveraging his own weight to pin the thrashing figure to the plush carpet. He fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, nails scratching, teeth bared, but Elias held fast. "Why?" Elias grunted, straining against the desperate struggle. "Why are you doing all this?" The man momentarily ceased his frantic movements, his wild eyes locking onto Elias's. "They took it all," he spat, venom dripping from the words. "My job, my life. This is just taking back what's mine." Before Elias could process the broken words, the distant wail of sirens began to penetrate the building's walls. Help was arriving. The man heard it too. With a final, explosive surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, he wrenched free and bolted. Elias gave chase through the darkened corridors, but the man moved with uncanny familiarity, melting into a service passage Elias hadn't even known existed. By the time uniformed officers swarmed the floor, he had vanished. A thorough search yielded nothing but the squatter's makeshift nest, a grim tableau in a forgotten storage closet on the 49th floor. The aftermath brought revelations. The Phantom was a former employee, dismissed years prior due to escalating behavioral issues. Rather than departing, he had simply stayed, dissolving into the building's interstitial spaces, surviving on scraps and stolen goods, obsessively seeking proof of the wrongful termination he blamed for his unraveling. Security at Apex Spire underwent a radical transformation. Every neglected corner was meticulously swept, access points reinforced, protocols rewritten. Yet, sometimes, in the profound quiet of the late hours, when the shadows stretch long and the building seems to hold its breath, Elias fancies he hears them again. Faint, fleeting footsteps from an empty floor above. Is he truly gone? Or merely withdrawn, watching from the hidden seams of the spire, waiting for another chance to reclaim his stolen life? One truth remains immutable. Elias will never again perceive an empty office tower as merely vacant. He knows now that silence can be deceptive, and sometimes the most unsettling dangers are those hiding in plain sight, breathing the same air just beyond the veil of the mundane. Mid-Sunday, the languor thick as dust motes in the afternoon sun, shattered when the first missive materialized. It rested against the apartment door, a relic in a time-weathered envelope, devoid of postage. Silas. His name, etched onto the brittle surface in graphite strokes so hesitant they might have been whispered onto the paper in near darkness. An unbidden tremor traced his spine before his fingers even brushed the seal. The paper exhaled a scent of forgotten places, of air trapped too long in sealed boxes. Inside, scrawled with a frantic energy that belied the single, repeated imperative. Come. Silas stood motionless in his narrow hallway. What summons was this? He placed the envelope on the scarred formica of his kitchen counter, a small, pale rectangle against the clutter. A constriction tightened around his ribs, a knot of apprehension he tried to dismiss. A prank, surely, or some bizarre guerrilla marketing campaign. No address offered guidance, no hour specified a rendezvous, just come. He forced himself through the motions of the following day, projecting normalcy like a shield. Work, commute, the weary climb up the stairs. And there, nestled beneath his door like a waiting serpent, another envelope. Same antique feel, same scent of decay, same solitary command. Come. Bile rose in his throat. He scanned the empty corridor, the worn carpet offering no imprint, no clue to the phantom messenger. Bolting the door, he leaned against it, the envelope clutched in a hand growing slick with sweat. His mind, a frantic cartographer, sketched maps of dread leading nowhere. He shoved the letter into a drawer, a futile attempt to bury the unease, and turned his attention to the ritual of dinner. Morning brought the third, lodged incongruously amongst junk mail in his building's communal box. Again, no stamp, no origin, only the stark imperative. Come. The script seemed bolder now, the letters swelling as if with impatience, desperate to seize his gaze. The knot in his chest cinched tighter. Back inside, he scrolled through his phone. No missed calls from unfamiliar numbers, no cryptic texts. He slumped onto the sofa, the television flickering unnoticed images before his vacant eyes. His gaze kept snagging on the front door, anticipating the silent arrival of yet more paper ghosts. By week's end, the count stood at 5, each a twin to the last. Aged envelopes, fragile paper-breathing dust, the relentless singular word. Come. A ritual of paranoia began. Nightly checks of window latches, the deadbolt thrown with deliberate force, the mundane sounds of the city. A branch scraping glass, the growl of a passing car, became charged with menace, potential heralds of his unseen correspondent. Sleep offered little refuge, splintered by anxious awakenings, sweat cooling on his skin, his ears straining for the rustle of paper at the threshold. But always, only silence greeted his vigil. On the 6th day, a strange certainty bloomed within him, unbidden and unnerving. The letters offered no coordinates, yet an image resolved in his mind with startling clarity. The derelict train station moldering on the city's fringe. He possessed no conscious memory of the place, only a vague awareness of its existence. A skeletal structure glimpsed from car windows, its windows blinded with plywood, perimeter signs warning off trespassers. Yet, waking that morning, Silas knew. The letters, silent on the specifics, were drawing him there. A visceral tremor ran through him, part fear, part reluctant acceptance. Ignoring this summons no longer felt like an option. He drove, the city receding, replaced by the melancholic gray of the outskirts. He parked beside a skeletal fence weeping rust. Noon, yet the sky hung low and oppressive, an overcast lid leaching color from the world. Emerging from the car, an electric prickle crawled up his neck. The station stood skeletal and stained, a canvas of faded graffiti. Vacant window sockets stared from the upper floors. Loose timbers groaned a discordant welcome on the wind. He picked his way over rubble, circling the structure, searching for ingress, for answers. A breach in the fence offered passage. Beyond lay an old loading dock, the concrete fractured, cradling puddles of stagnant, iridescent water. The air hung thick with the cloying perfume of mildew and ancient oil. His heart hammered against his ribs. Moving with deliberate quiet, his steps crunching softly on broken glass, he saw it. A vast cargo door, nudged slightly ajar. A weak luminescence bled from the gap, the hesitant glow of a dying fluorescent tube, perhaps, or a battery-starved torch. He peered inside. Expectation coiled, waiting for a figure to emerge from the gloom. Nothing. He slipped through the opening. In the cavernous space, positioned directly beneath the sputtering overhead light, sat a solitary rocking chair. Empty, pointed towards him. The vast room was a study in dereliction. Rusted machinery slumped against the walls, crates huddled in a dusty corner. Motes danced in the weak shafts of light. Then, a sound that scraped along his nerves, the faint, dry squeak of the rocking chair. He scanned the shadows, convinced someone lurked just beyond sight. But the chair was undeniably vacant, yet it oscillated faintly, as if its occupant had only just risen. The air thickened. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He remained frozen, listening, waiting for a presence to declare itself. Silence answered, punctuated only by the rhythmic, ghostly creak. The urge to speak, to call out, lodged itself in his throat, voiceless. Slowly, compelled, he approached the chair. It was ancient, its wooden frame worn smooth in places, flakes of paint clinging precariously to the arms. Dust filmed the seat. Scuff marks scarred the concrete beneath the rockers, testament to countless unseen movements. No letters lay nearby, no notes, no shred of explanation. After minutes suspended in the stale air, the futility of it washed over him. He backed away, retreating from the loading bay, his breath coming in shallow bursts. He completed a circuit of the station's exterior, eyes probing the decay for any further anomaly. Nothing. A hollow ache of disappointment settled in, mingled with a rising sense of foolishness. He had chased whispers to this wasteland seeking revelation, only to find an empty chair rocking beneath a dying light. He returned to his car, glancing back repeatedly, the skin across his shoulders tight and cold. The drive home was a retreat, his mind insisting on forgetting, even as a deeper intuition whispered that he had merely disturbed the surface of something vast and incomprehensible. In the days that followed, the letters resumed their silent siege, slipped beneath his door with unnerving regularity. But their content shifted. They spoke now of us, hinted at our memories, yet withheld the identity of the sender, the nature of the purported bond. The envelopes seemed even more fragile, the paper thinner, drier. The script grew wilder, bordering on frantic. The same faint, musty odor clung to them. He tried discarding them, but found himself retrieving them from the bin hours later, smoothing the creases, searching for a clue overlooked. Late one night, a soft thump against the door sent adrenaline surging through him. He flung the door open, hoping to confront the messenger. Emptiness greeted him. Only the familiar shape of an envelope lay on the welcome mat. His hands shook as he tore it open in the dim hallway light. "We are waiting." The same tremulous script. A knot formed in his throat, tight and painful. He wanted to scream into the vacant corridor to demand an end to this torment. Instead, he retreated, locking the door, the click of the bolt echoing in the sudden, profound silence. His apartment felt smaller, the corners darker. He stuffed the latest missive into the already crowded drawer and crawled into bed, eyes wide in the darkness, cataloging every creak and settling groan of the old building. Sleep, when it finally came, was a troubled sea, haunted by the image of a lone chair rocking under a flickering, indifferent light. He called in sick the next day. The thought of navigating the outside world, of feigned interactions, felt impossible. Paranoia was a constant hum beneath his skin. He spent hours peering through the peephole, the distorted view of the hallway offering no comfort. Around noon, the confinement became unbearable. Action, any action, felt necessary. Calling the authorities seemed futile. What could he report? Cryptic notes, a feeling, an abandoned chair? They'd dismiss it, label him eccentric, perhaps unstable. Pulling on a jacket, he fled the apartment, seeking refuge in the anonymity of the streets. He walked for miles, scrutinizing faces, searching for a flicker of recognition, of complicity in the eyes of strangers. Every sideways glance felt like an accusation. His gut twisted with suspicion. Returning that evening, braced for the inevitable, he found it. Another envelope. This one spoke of the place where we meet. It instructed him back to the station's loading dock, and for the first time, it offered a specific anchor: midnight. His pulse leaped. A part of him screamed to ignore it, to burn the letter, to board up his own door. But the insidious pull, stronger now, undeniable, insisted. He had to know. Fear was a cold weight in his stomach, yet the prospect of enduring this indefinite siege was worse. The hours leading up to midnight crawled. He paced his apartment, a caged animal. Should he tell someone? Bring a friend? The thought felt like a betrayal, a disruption of whatever strange pact was being forged. He left his phone on the kitchen counter, a conscious Severin. Logic felt distant, irrelevant. Only the image of the rocking chair, waiting in the darkness, seemed real. Just before 11:30, flashlight in hand, he drove back towards the city's edge. The roads were deserted ribbons unfurling under the sodium glow. Each mile marker hammered like a second heartbeat. He parked in the same spot, near the rusted fence. The station was a hulking silhouette against a sky bruised with cloud, the moon a sliver of bone-white light. Shadows writhed. He slipped through the fence, the ground treacherous beneath his feet. His flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating the familiar mosaic of stagnant water and shattered glass. The stale air clung to his lungs. His own breathing sounded unnaturally loud. He nudged the heavy cargo door. It groaned open. The light above the rocking chair still flickered, weaker now, casting long, dancing shadows. The chair itself sat angled towards the entrance, rocking gently, rhythmically, as if propelled by an invisible hand. He stopped, rigid, scanning the vast emptiness. His light swept over peeling walls, stacked crates, rusted metal corpses. The silence was immense, pressing in. Then he saw them. A drift of envelopes scattered on the floor beside the chair. Each bore his name, Silas, scrawled across the aged paper. His chest tightened. He moved forward, picked one up, the familiar scent of dust and time. Inside, "We remember." His mouth turned to sand. He snatched another. "We are connected." A cold sweat trickled down his spine. He swept the flashlight beam around the cavernous space again, desperately seeking the source, the we. Nothing. The fine hairs on his arms prickled. His breathing grew shallow. He tore open more envelopes, variations on a theme. Memory, connection, waiting. Confusion warred with a primal fear. Who were we? He stood there, lost in the heart of the decaying station, time stretching and thinning. Minutes, an hour. The rocking chair continued its steady, ghostly rhythm. A whisper escaped him, swallowed by the space. "Who's there?" Only the echo answered. He took a hesitant step back, then another, his hands trembling. Flight beckoned, yet the mystery held him captive. He waited, mind racing through improbable scenarios. Elaborate hoax, vengeful acquaintance, sheer madness. Finally, the oppressive weight of the place became too much. He turned, the urge to escape overwhelming. As he reached the threshold, one final, distinct creak sounded from the rocking chair behind him. He didn't look back. He pushed the heavy door, the groan of metal sealing